Top of the morning, everyone. My name is Tshidi and I'm back with another video. Today's video is about the top 5 things you need to remove from your resume. Number 0.01, the first thing you should remove is that big page that says curriculum vitae of so and so. That page is no longer necessary. If you're still doing that, please make sure that that's the first thing that you remove. That's not even number 1. So it's not even in the list of the top 5 things you need to remove. First thing first is outdated objective statement. Objective statements that we normally see are always talking about seeking a challenging position to utilize my skills. That's normally what it says. And I think a lot of people have actually used that line for a very long time. An objective statement should basically be a summary statement. It should be a powerful introduction of who you are, your skills, highlighting your achievement. It should literally cover exactly what you're capable of doing. So if you're a developer, for example, it should be focusing specifically on your development experience, and it's just literally a highlight of that. Normally, you'll find that an objective statement is the best version of a cover letter, but in a much better way, because cover letters nobody reads, but objective statements should actually just cover a few highlights of those. So it's very important that you actually get rid of this generic one that everybody has. You need to make sure that you speak to the hiring manager, speak to exactly what they're looking for, and highlight specific things that you think are important for that. That's the first thing. Number 2 is irrelevant job experiences. I know. I used to have 6 to 6 different pages of resume, and one of the things that I actually covered in there was some of the jobs that I actually started with. I used to put every single thing about those jobs. I used to make sure that everybody can see them. Unfortunately, it is no longer necessary to be able to do that. You can just list them. You don't have to put any details about that. Focus mostly on the relevance. Is this job relevant to what you're looking for? So you might be able to say, I started working in 1999. But from 1999 up until 2024, what are some of the things that you want to highlight? It's important that you only highlight specific things that are relevant to the focus of what you're looking for, or anything that you have done in the last 10 years. Resume match should be based on the job that you're applying for. That's why we always say every time you have a job or a resume, try and tailor it to the job that you're applying to. Number 3, generic skills. There are certain generic skills that people are still using, for example, that they're still putting in the resume. One of those is, I'm hardworking, I'm a team player. It's fantastic that you have those, but there are some other skills that are very technical that are quite required by the different jobs that you've got. So the one thing that I always say is it's important that you analyze the job description, identify the key skills that you think are very important in that, and make sure that those experiences and skills that you're looking for are highlighted in your resume. If one of the things that they're asking about is about teamwork, then you can actually make sure that you highlight that in your description. But please don't just put descriptions or skills that do not make sense. Like one of the skills that people will, for example, put as well is things like Microsoft skills. What Microsoft skills? Is it what? Using how to use Word documents, because the problem with just saying Microsoft skills or Excel is that it's not telling me anything. Can you do pivot tables? Can you do Excel for this? Can you do that? That's what's important to the hiring manager. So it's important that when it comes to some of these things, you make sure that you identify the specific skills that are required for that job and you highlight them in your resume. So please don't put skills that are not necessary for that job. Number 4, personal information overload. I know this one, it's very tricky because it depends on the country that you are at, that there's certain requirements that recruiters or a hiring manager might need. However, there's certain things that is not necessary to actually have in your resume. So things like hobbies and interests. I've did a video not so long ago that speaks about some of the things that are included in job CVs in the EU that I think should actually stop. Check out that video because it goes into a bit more detail as some of these things that I'm going to highlight. However, as much as it's fascinating to know what somebody's hobbies are, they're not going to help you get a job. If it's a well-respected recruiter that knows what they're looking for, they're not going to look at the hobbies and say, this person cannot climb a mountain, so we're not going to hire them. Unless if the job requires you to be able to climb the mountain. Your personal information or the details that you provide, they must be directly related to the job that you're applying to, because where things go wrong is that people tend to put things that are not directly related to the job that they're applying to. So that's one of the things that you should have. The other thing that I think, as much as I'm saying there's certain things that you should remove or information overload, let me tell you some of the things that I think are important. Number 1 is contact information. How do I get hold of you? Is there an email address? Is there a contact number that I can get hold of you? That's very, very important. Number 2 is professional social media. Are you using LinkedIn? Are you using GitHub? What are you using to be able to communicate your professional journey with that? And then number 3 is location. Mentioning the city is enough. Please do not go out there and put your exact address. So please try by all means to make sure that you only just put the location to say you live in Bern or you live in Zurich or you live in this place. some of the personal information that I think should be excluded from a resume, depending on which country you live in, as I mentioned, is things like date of birth. It's unnecessary for people to actually figure out what your date of birth is because it doesn't add value to what you're supposed to do from a job point of view. Number two, marital status or family status. How many kids you've got should not have any bearing as to whether you can do the job or you can't do the job. The photo, unless you live in the EU or you're applying for a modeling job. In the EU, it's still a requirement by some of the recruiters, which, like I said in my last video, I still don't understand why some of the recruiters still require that. But I do not think that a photo in a resume should actually be something that we put out there because it actually creates biases when it comes to our decision making as to whether we want to invite that person for a job interview or not. And then the next thing is social security number if you're in the US, or ID number in some of the other countries, religious or political affiliations, or sexual orientation, also things that I don't think are necessary for you to actually add into the job, unless it's actually a requirement that the people are actually saying they need that. And then salary information, please never add salary information into your resume because sometimes you'll find that your team members are the ones that are actually going to also be interviewing you to understand who you are, and it sometimes causes a few problems here and there. Health information, unless you're going into a job that requires you to disclose your health, there's no need in actually putting that information in your resume. The last two is relevant social media platforms as well as hobbies and interests. Those are some of the things that I think you should stop putting in your resume. Number five, typos and grammatical errors. Unfortunately, this one is not you putting it out there. It's just making sure that when it comes to your resume and you're about to send it to a recruiter, you've checked it out for typos and you've checked out for any grammatical errors that are there. Now, there's different platforms and tools that are available for you guys to use. One of those is Grammarly, which I use quite a lot. You can use a free version. It'll help you go through every single thing on your resume to make sure that from the grammar point of view, as well as some of the errors that you might have had, whether it's typos or any other thing, it highlights that in your resume. If you still don't have Grammarly or you haven't yet bought Grammarly, there's a few tips that I can actually give you into making sure that you actually check that your resume does not have any grammatical errors. Number one is take a break before proofreading. So once you've been working on the resume, take a minute, take a walk, come back after an hour, a couple of hours, and then proofread your resume yourself. Number two, print it out. Sometimes it's very nice to actually print out your resume, read through it while it's actually printed, and then you can highlight some of the things that you need to actually correct. Number three, read it out loud. It's very important that you actually take time to actually read it out. Please don't skim through some of the words as if you're actually reading a novel. Read every single syllable, every single word that you actually see on the resume. It will help you start making sense of whether it actually makes sense or it doesn't make sense. So it's important that you print it out, you read it out loud as you actually do that. Number four, check for one type of error at a time. So you either check for spelling. So don't try and check for everything all at the same time. Try and check for, you're going to check for spelling, and then you're going to check for grammar, and then you're going to check for this, you're going to check for that. It's important that you actually take these steps as they are. You can do them at different levels. It doesn't really matter. Number five, use spell check wisely, because where the issue sometimes comes in is that there's certain words that are spelled out and they're spelled out that way and not spelled out in an English way. And sometimes you go change them because, you know, your spelling error checker is trying to spell them whichever way. That doesn't help you in any other way. And then number six, there's one called watch out for homophones. Now, homophones are basically words that sounds the same. Like things that are, for example, things like there, their, or they are. Any type of those words, watch out for those, because that's where we normally make a lot of mistakes, where a lot of people don't know the difference between they and their, or they and they are. Double check names and titles. That's also very important. So make sure that you actually take time to double check some of the names and titles to ensure that they're exactly as they're supposed to be spelled. Ask for somebody to proofread it. This is another foolproof one that you can also use. You can ask a friend to proofread some of these things. It's easier, it's quick. They go through it themselves without any influence from your side, and they'll be able to tell you where there's some issues that are there. And then the next one is check for consistency. Is the font size the right font size? Alignment, make sure that it's aligned. Consistency is very important in resumes. And then the next thing is verify numerical information, because that's the other mistake that a lot of people make. Dates that are there, please make sure that it's verified. The next one is use resources. As I mentioned, Grammarly is one of the best resources. Now, those are for me some of the key things that every time you think about a resume, you should make sure that you actually remove from your resume because they add no value to your next thing. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you like those tips, please don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to like, and please share it with as many of your friends as possible. I'll see you in the next video. Peace.